What I think what we absolutely do need to do in this current moment is look at a whole series of issues that are still left undone. And I think those of us in the Black community, for instance, need to not only be concerned about the fact that our children are absolutely suffering in school systems and in private schools throughout the state, but we also, in the spirit of those folks who came before us, we also need to check ourselves on some things. And this goes for any group. If you're fighting for your own interests, I think that one thing that's really important as we move forward, perhaps this will happen in other discussions over the course of the next 5 months, we need to open ourselves up, in my opinion, to some other struggles. There are a lot of Black folk who would not hesitate to struggle along racial issues. When we talk about LGBTQ issues, right, oftentimes there is a deafening silence in our communities, right? A deafening silence, as if we've forgotten that when we talk about a lesbian, a gay, a bisexual community, we're also talking about Black and brown people as well, right? There are a number of us who will talk seriously about the need to deal with the prison industrial complex, but will refuse to interrogate sexism and patriarchy in this society, right? So I agree, there does need to be discomfort, okay? But I also, especially if we're talking about building alliances and friendships, one thing that I would absolutely like to see is that as we move forward with audacity, we're also self-reflective, self-critical, and look at the ways in which we buy into sites of privilege just as we're being marginalized in other ways.
I grew up outside of D.C., and then we moved to Littleton, Colorado, which was not as post-racial as people might think.
I didn't get your name.
Ken Drew.
Ken Drew.
Far as the disruption, I would argue that we spend the majority of our lives, K through 14, trying to keep kids from being disruptive, and then then people ask them to be disruptive. So I don't really see how when you train people to do something for some 20 years of their lives to expect them to do other than that. And now with Facebook, where people are always worried about being disliked, I of course have no social networking. So where people are always being afraid to be disliked, or you're afraid about something, as far as job employment or something like that, as far as, if you say this, you're probably not gonna get hired. I think, to ask people to be disruptive is a challenge. But that is not even my question. That last comment you made threw me in a loop. And my response to that is to ask Blacks to focus on things outside of, at this current space and time, outside of race and economics is a challenge because we have some class issues that we're still working through the last 2 years of King's life. So then to ask us to deal with the lesbians and gays and transgender people within our community outside of some of the most basic health concerns and to work on their civil rights also, that's a challenge. We're still working our own issues out, even though they're within our community. And I think many of us are offended by the idea that immediately their struggle is connected to our struggle. And that's something we still have to work through. But that's still not even what I was going to ask the question about. Because that last thing threw me for a loop. Let's see, Dave. My real question is, for all the professors on the stage, I can't help but notice all the pastors and all the clergy that were involved in the civil rights struggle, so on and such forth. I know there were other people, so on and such forth, but it's very clear that there were a lot of pastors involved. What is the difference, or what has changed within the Black church where social justice does not appear to be at the forefront now as it was then? I don't want to go into more details, but if you could just perhaps hint at what's going on structurally, or what has changed, or maybe something is happening, and just maybe the rest of us aren't noticing it. Thank you.
My friend, thank you for the question. One of the things questions that we had to struggle with, especially in the 60s and 70s, and often in the Southern movement, we were asking ourselves whether or not our goal was to, quote, join the mainstream, or was our goal to create a new river? King, at his best, was again and again and again warning us, as Jimmy Baldwin did, about desiring to buy into the values of the society that we were struggling with. And towards the end of his life, he was asking us to face the fact that whatever our color, there were three deep issues that we had to deal with if we wanted to make this a better and more human country. And you have sort of sneaked in on some of the central concerns that he had. He said there was a triple evil that we need to deal with. And he was saying this to black people, white people, yellow, green, pink people. The three evils that he was focusing on to the end of his life were: one, the evil of racism. Everybody was pretty clear about that. But the second evil that he kept raising up was the evil of materialism. Buying into the American dream as interpreted as material welfare and doing better than our parents did. And the third thing that he said we would have to deal with if we were going to have a truly human society was militarism. Somebody reminded me a few days ago that you could say that King said, "I have a dream," and somebody else is saying, "I have a drone." King was deeply concerned about those three issues towards the end of his life. And my sense, my brother, is that it has become too easy for us to forget that materialism issue. America lives with that almost as its unofficial religion. And we have been sucked into it. I was just reading again his letter from Birmingham jail this afternoon. And he was reflecting on what he was then calling the white church. And he said that the white church had forgotten that the original Church of Jesus Christ was a church that was small in number, but large in holy influence. as I read that, I felt very much that he would have some very strange feelings about what it means that we have come to the point where our goal is to be large in numbers, but small when it comes to dealing with the pain of our communities. So I think that that was one of the things that has gotten to us, that we have forgotten that he and his master Jesus were always calling people to stand with the poor, to stand with the broken, to stand with the beat up, and not to try to stand with the big wheels in town. I think that that's a part of the difficulty, that we've forgotten what that church experience was called to be in the first place. And we could talk more about that, but let me just pass that on to you as something that we could think about. Saying to you, never be satisfied, though, with criticizing the church for what it does or doesn't do, without asking, and where do I stand? And what am I going to be about, even if they're not about? I'd like to encourage you in that direction, okay?